I spent some time in the last few months in Nostr, and here's some reflections of my time in there. First of all, it has, or it used to have at least, it already changed a bit in the last month, but it had that early small village type of a community feel, which you have here in Airchat, but also in the early days of internet as well, in the early 90s, when there was excitement, everything was possible. People were quite polite. It was a time of innocence, if you will, in a sense, but also a time of discovery, and you didn't ask permission to build stuff. You could put up your website, and if you came up with an idea, you could build it, and that's the spirit in Nostr at the moment, because the protocol is so simple. You don't need any permission. If you've been playing around with the technologies in the last 20 years, internet technologies, I mean, it's so simple to do anything in there. And that's an empowering feeling, which has been missing quite a bit already in a lot of these siloed Web 2.0, even Web 3 applications and developments lately. The strength of Nostr is its community at this point. Its early adopters have been the Bitcoin communities. The demographic, how I been figuring out based on the Nostrica, the first unconference in Costa Rica, sponsored by Jack Dorsey and others, is middle-aged tech people. Some of them are Bitcoin maximalists or just from that genre, but in general there's a lot of builders. Those people who've been around, those who actually been seeing the open source movements coming along, Linux building Linux, Red Hat, all these type of things, even going further to the 80s, where it was a bit of the libertarian movement. The basic values were openness and equality and freedom of speech and all these things which are under the continuous pressure and if you were building any tech in the late 90s, before the dot-bomb boom busted, you probably felt sense of urgency, sense of awe, in a way that there was so much happening, things were moving so fast, it was exciting, it was thrilling, but there was a lot of missing FOMO as well, and all these other sides of it as well. Nostr has been gaining rapid development and advances in the last, basically since the mid-December when Jack Dorsey gave 14 Bitcoin to the development of Nostr ecosystem. So after that, a lot of activities picked up, and there's been numerous browsers, tools, the ecosystem value chain's been catching up, and it's already supporting a lot of different use cases, even though the regular browsing, the Twitter type of browser experience is the dominant one at this point, but it's starting to support also other activities, and I would say also Nostr native initiatives, which are not derivatives of the copycatting the previous tech or applications, is also starting to emerge. one of the kill apps, if there's any other use cases, is the combination of payments and messaging. And because everything is signed, it's in a sense more secure, even though everything is public at this stage on the nodes. You can have direct messages. The metadata is at this point at least public, but the messages are encrypted. But the fact that you can send Lightning payments basically without any transaction costs natively with one or two taps is a powerful concept which has been missing from the early internet, even though there was this 402. 404 is so famous, but 402 is not. And this is one of the things which might help the adoption and use cases for Nostr. Obviously, it's also censorship resistant. The clients are working, at least some of them are working either with or on top of Tor in China and Russia and places where the government is suppressing and monitoring the IP traffic. There's been also some famous people, somewhat, or for one or other reason, famous people like Snowden and a few other ones joining now later on in the April to the platform. So these are pushing more people which are coming out of the Bitcoin circles to the Nostr platform. There's no one common view how to build Nostr, and there's a lot of these new initiatives called NIPs, Nostr implementation possibilities, basically which are the protocol level instructions. And this is something where it's the strength of the Nostr, but also its weakness, in a sense that it seems to be getting harder and harder to get consensus. What's supposed to be in the protocol level, what needs to be implemented and what not. If you're building any of the clients or relays or something substantial, it's becoming a full-time job to actually just follow the GitHub issues and discussions. So this is clearly not possible. The first Nostr wars, if you will, have already been flaming actually this week because some of the implementations were breaking the previous compatibility, backward compatibility in some of the protocol implementations like images. So the fragmentation is already happening. There are also some shortcuts. The infrastructure is a bit challenging, even though it's really simple, because there's no blockchain underneath, there's no one common state. It's hard to build a reliable, fast, extensive client messaging system where you can fetch all the nodes, all the messages for the user, and building on top of that still emerging, wobbling backend, if you will, is a challenge which you see it while you're using it, that it's not as good as using Twitter or any of these centralized databases at this point. Yet the bigger challenges will come when the payment needs to be involved. Now everything is being more or less free. There's been some paid relays, and you can pay for the relays if you like, but you don't need to. Hosting of images, rich media will and is expensive. That's not sustainable in the future. The temptation is always to go to the advertising model, going for the centralized services, make the protocol in a way redundant, that you will silo everything. have a few AWS instances or big players coming in and serving all the content, absorbing all the costs, obviously with their own business model. But if you really want to build something which is censorship resistant, something which is based on the values and really not building or repeating the mistakes of the previous generations of the internet technologies, it's getting hard. It's not obvious the easy path, and there are players who are coming in and cutting corners, and many of the users don't care. It's not important for them. They take whatever is the easiest, whatever is the most convenient, where the onboarding is the best, where you don't need to worry about anything. And this is the struggle of anything if you want to stick on some more sticky principles. And it takes quite a bit of courage from the developers as well. The easy way is to take some VC money, take some investor money and build something which you will scale, and then your monetization model needs to support the investor intake of money in order to pay it back. So this will reflect on the choices you will make. The early clients have been resisting so far this temptation, but there are already teams coming in, turning the existing products from alternative use models or underlying technologies to this use case. And obviously the big boys are also looking for it. VP, WordPress, not even talking about the biggest big tech. They are all observing, but at this point this is just too early, too fringe to be concerned about. But it's clear we need something like Nostr, where the user owns the keys, owns the content, owns the data, and is free to move. And that's the brilliant user experience or insight, when you can use the same username and password if you want to use the regular language. When you have signed up for any of the Nostr clients, you can use the same logins to by any of the other applications. And this obviously brings some challenges for the developers, because the mode is non-existing or it's different from the previous one. Most of the clients are anyway built on MIT or open source licenses, so that's also making it easy for anyone to fork and start to build on top of already existing code. But it's also a strength if you compare it to the other alternatives to Twitter and Instagrams and these. Farcaster, I think they have between 10 or 20k users. They've been around a few years. Nostr is now 3 years. Blue Sky, building protocol as well, having a demo app, as they call it, but now it's becoming a thing itself, having more funding, I would guess, than the total Nostr ecosystem at this point. I don't think they have much. Well, they've been closed beta, and it's hard to get an invite for them. Same thing with Lens and a few of the other initiatives at this point. So where to go, what to do? Mastodon, the bigger one, the big elephant in the room. I think it's a really nice idea, but the user experience, as we've seen also from the data from last year, I don't think too many people have actually kept keep on posting there after the initial sign up and the shock of the Elon Musk. Following people from different instances is difficult. It's still somebody else's computer, you using somebody else's compute storage, and at any time you can be kicked out. There's a lot of these points in the Nostr GitHub mentioned why Nostr is needed. It's getting tiresome to always sign up and then somebody else own your data, and you have to start from scratch, and you cannot build leverage on the things you're doing. This definitely needs to change. Also, the government regulation is getting tighter for anything and everything related to the freedom of speech, commerce, and all those issues where government wants to have a tight grip. It's not getting easier, it's getting harder. These are the things which are challenges, and I think we need some principled positions, like what's happening with the Bitcoin in the fundamental level at this point. What are the big challenges with Nostr? I think the ecosystem, can it keep it together? Can the small village, let's do it together spirit still keep going? There's already on Nostr, one of the early clients, the developers started to do something else, so we're starting to see that people are starting to burn out. The initial thrill, the initial influx of new users at the moment is also going down. The statistics are not looking that good, but altogether I think things are getting there, getting up all the time. New people are joining, but it's taking its time. So the ecosystem at the moment doesn't sustain the development efforts unless there's some investor money or some other means of substituting the gap before things are in a certain level. The fragmentation, what I already mentioned, then the big challenges like the rich media, how to host it, how to actually introduce the payments. These are issues, but I think the biggest issue of all is the use case, how to introduce new people. Now the Twitter situation has been calming down, so the immediate urge to find something else is not exactly there. So the network effect is the biggest thing. Why should I go to some new place if nobody sees my post? Why should I talk here when Airchat has only a few people in? Early adapters, there's only so many of them, but after we run out of them in a way, or they get tired, how to get the next wave of people who are more picky in a way, they need more smooth, elegant processes in place. They are more impatient. This is the biggest challenge. In some sense, Nostr is already going beyond what's usually possible in the regular social media platforms, not because it's technically hard, but just because they don't want to implement these things. For example, here in the picture there's an Apple podcast player, which you can play podcast on your feed. The similar features like playing TikToks, Instagrams, Spotify, podcast, music, opening PDFs, pretty much all the file formats are soon available playing on your Nostr browser. And this is just one example of the speed when a lot of people can do stuff without asking anyone's permission to implement and have fun and explore. Open innovation, pushing new releases daily or almost hourly, a little bit of competition, but also collaboration and ambition to build something open and new and great yields results amazingly fast. And I think this is, if you look, and hopefully you can see the text in the picture, what's actually now being discussed, how you combine payments and share file formats, and so much to come in a short period of time, even replacing GitHub, which obviously has also some other urgent pressures to be done due to the Bitcoin core attacks at the moment happening. There's been a lot of discussion and actually action as well in the Nostr network in the last I would say this year, about the views, the function of the views, and because a lot of the stuff is coming from the advertising model, and it's not really needed if you don't have an advertising model, or even if you cannot count the views properly because there's no central state. It has gone so far that it became almost like the chap wars, chapping meaning the tipping in the Nostr world, and the leading iOS client Damus removed the like button and wanted to indicate that, hey, if you want to acknowledge the order of the node, send a little bit of a fraction of a cent over, and it's way better signal than just liking something. So there was only Zaps mode. You could take it off if you didn't but the thing was that you couldn't see the likes either for the other people's nodes, and there was a lot of people who were like, "Oh no, I don't want to have that at all. I'm stop using Damus." Then actually Iris implemented the option that you can take them all away, all the reactions, chaps, likes, retweets, and even replies. And now it's optional. You can pick and choose whatever you like, and this is basically, I think, is a really good question to ask. What are the ways to acknowledge? What are ways to show your appreciation, show your presence when we are not really present, but not taking the advertising or revenue or business models imposing things on us which probably lead to the wrong signals. And what do you measure? That's what you're going to get. Jack Dorsey just announced his 10 million donation, out of which 5 million goes to the development of Nostr. It's quite a bit of money considered that the teams are small, mainly usually one person, maybe full-time, half-time, and then others supporting the ecosystem consisting of clients, tools, and relays, and ever-growing part of different aspects of it. But nevertheless, this is the time when the support is needed before the fully commercialized products are ready and the user adoption is in the level that it can support the teams and the products. This is a pretty exciting new era, avenue, universe, whatever word you want to use, combining Nostr, the decentralized public node service with payments, and then you have AI world, which is open sourced. If you combine these two together, it opens up a lot of possibilities where you don't have to ask permission from anyone, and you can explore, and it just takes ideas, innovation, brilliant people, and a weekend, and you can probably do something that the big guys haven't managed to do in months or years before. On Nostr, there's a few interesting features. One of them is, that's in the Iris client, iris.to. You can view anyone's profile as them. So basically, it's a feature. You can see their notifications, you can see their feed, who they're following, how does it look like. Well, that's how the protocol works. You cannot see the private stuff, you cannot change anything, but you can see things. So that's rather interesting to see, for example, that for those high-profile accounts who have a lot of people following, how does the world look in their eyes. Well, that's more like the lurker mode, but another thing which came just a few weeks ago was called highlighter.com. And it's a really fascinating idea. Basically, you can highlight anything if you're browsing the web. There's a Chrome extension, and you just select some text, and it becomes a note of itself, or like a tweet, if you will. And it can start to live its own life. People can comment it, they can tip it, and you can also, as far as I recall, it also functions like, if you know the Kindle's function, where you can see what other people have been highlighting. So it works similarly. So you can see the highlights in the text as well, if I remember correctly. But that's really fascinating idea, and coming back also to the 20 years back days of bookmarking, and was it Dick and Delicious and all these things. So yeah, I love the idea, but I also take the notion from Naval that yeah, it's nice to collect, but how often we go back to those things.
So I don't know enough about AI to map if this is possible. I hope somebody on Airchat who knows about AI could chime in. Would really appreciate it. But the idea would be, what if you could talk to an AI with encryption? So like, I'm talking to this AI, and it has my public key, and everything it says is encrypted, and only my private key can decrypt it. And that public key could be my Bitcoin address too. So it's like two birds in one stone. I pay them with my public key, and that same public key is used to encrypt the data that it is sending me. This way, you could have third-party providers run a giant LLM. Like, I heard that ChatGPT-4 cost $700,000 a day to keep online. And that's probably because of how many users they have too, but it's also probably because of how complicated it is to sustain a model that powerful. So the beauty of this is, instead of just having an open source LLM on all of our computers at home, we could still outsource it to warehouses and big data centers. But these big data centers couldn't see what the AI was helping us with, and it also couldn't see what we were talking to the AI about. I think that is probably the most realistic outcome for quote unquote decentralized AI that is not controlled by huge corporations, and not a huge privacy concern for everyone that's worrying about that right now. But the real trouble is, like, how do you encrypt what's going on inside the AI so that the data center owner can't peek in? And I talked about this in another room, possibly using TEEs, but those suffer from side channel attacks, and it's not exactly perfect. So I'm curious, is there a way to encrypt LLMs? Are encrypted LLMs a thing? And, how would that all work? I think that's a highly valuable application if it's viable.
I don't think it's the compute, it's the query itself. Can you do it without exposing what you're asking for? Can you encrypt it before you send it, or anonymize it somehow before you send it? And I'm not sure whether that's possible unless you anonymize the user in that sense. But on the other hand, like the link shows, the local models are coming. They're already running on a high-end mobiles at the moment, and open source community is making it available soon. So I think it's becoming feasible. I don't know whether it's actually makes sense to have a still big in gigabytes models in your local phone, but hopefully we have that option soon.
Yeah, I have some ideas about this. I think this is the conversation we were having the other day somewhere else. It should absolutely be doable. There should be able to be a layer of encryption. Now, I don't know if it's a smart contract that sort of sends the result via a cryptocurrency transaction to a vault, which is then only accessible by the person with a private key. Maybe that's where the payment happens, but there's all sorts of verification. A verification of privacy that's trustless, a verification to the model company, that they can look at the functioning of their model for functional information, but not specific identifying information. And crucially, it's important for bias, because I think one of the querying antagonization techniques for detecting what's going on with the model will be querying it with a series of preset, specifically formatted prompts that maybe this is where the Neuron analysis gets in, actually, because maybe you can test for whether some of these obscure neurons are firing when they should fire. So this is a whole thing that could be useful, and I'm not going to die on any hill. But AI and crypto, natural bed partners. And this reminds me of a conversation I had early on with Naval, where there's a function to memes, and that they're a shibboleth and they're a means of communication. So if I say to Naval, no time for love and Dr. Jones, he knows that's Temple of Doom. If I say, return the map, return what you've stolen from me, he knows that's Time Bandits. So that simultaneously lets him know that we're on some common generational wavelength. And it also confirms that, I'm probably not imposturing that situation. And I bring it up here because I wonder if that same sort of meme-based content could be used to query these models. Like, for instance, a model trained up to a certain point wouldn't know what Bye Felicia would mean, let's say, as an example. So what are those alphanumerical memes that models can be used to antagonize and query models for the authenticity of their underlying compute?
So here, somebody actually already had this idea before we did on Airchat, and they explain how you can use homomorphic encryption to do this. But the problem is we need advanced hardware to speed up homomorphic encryption operations, because they're very slow. So the author of the article is saying that over the next 5 years that hardware should develop, and this should become possible. And then perhaps, we can have like the payments and the encryption be all in one. But I'm not sure if you would need a special type of encryption key. Maybe with DIDs you could make the payments and encryption all in one. But it's a really interesting idea, and I really think it's the future beyond self-hosting AIs, because who knows how powerful these LLMs could become, and if more computational power helps get better results, then outsourcing it to big data centers and preserving our privacy at the same time probably would let us get the best of both worlds. It's just kind of like the user server model in Nostr. So, you don't expect users to run the LLM. You have servers do it, and then you get all the magic and trust minimization that you can. So it seems like we're going to need specialized hardware that is still general, like can perhaps do homomorphic encryption and zero-knowledge proofs. So that way we can get fruits from both industries, decentralized networks and AI, in the sense of preserving encrypted connections and just being able to, verify that things occurred. Is very useful, being able to pay for that. So these proofs are extremely expensive to compute, homomorphic encryption, and especially zero-knowledge proofs. So if we have hardware that can improve that, and there's a huge demand for it in both arenas, that could possibly lower hardware costs in the long run if there were more people buying the hardware and you could do larger manufacturing runs. So I'm hopeful. And I know FPGAs are already popular, but I heard there's some new technology being developed called a VPU. Not so sure about it, so it'll be interesting to see what the future holds. But I think those are probably the most promising directions for people looking around, of how to advance this industry in a cypherpunk way.
Meanwhile, while we're waiting for these more sophisticated models to come affordable, Palm 2 was announced by Google, which has also mobile LLM that runs offline, and the next generation should be even smaller and faster. Then the other alternative probably is to have a trusted third party like Mullvad VPN type of provider, or maybe one of the big ones if you trust Apple or somebody else to do your compute. And then the local run, do it yourself, self-hosting, like hosting your WordPress. Just buy some cheap VPS and run the thing yourself. Just a guest on somebody else's server. That's the concept in Fediverse. But the same happens also in Nostr, in a sense that relays are not obliged to host your content, so it can disappear. You still have your keys, but the data can be gone with the wind. So how to prevent that? You could always host your own relay backup things. Is that feasible at the end? How many people will do that? We already saw some of the early initiatives in Nostr, like I don't want to name the names, but there was one browser, for example, my guess is there's more than one, where the developer was really active and then started to do something else, at least for a while. So burnout and not enough monetary incentives are the real risks. And in this article's case, it just became too popular and too expensive for the host maintainer to finance him or herself, and this led to the closing of the server, unless the donations are enough, and that's usually a hard hill to climb to have it sustainably in the level that you can do it for a long term. Arthur Brueggemann is making really good points. So if you consider Nostr just, in quotation marks, a Twitter alternative, a social media alternative, that's an opportunity and exciting as it is. But if you start to consider it as a infrastructure for an app ecosystem, maybe even alternative for iOS and Play Store, then you may start to get more excited. So he lists a few things which are already available, and I will just quote them for you here. There's an open cloud database with a standard API. You have authentication with tamper-proof of all events, documents, files, records, well-defined data types. You have a decentralized monetization, Bitcoin at least, but it doesn't matter, you can put something else there as well. You have Web of Trust as a potential solution to app safety issues. You have shared open network effect for the benefit of any new app. So there's something to think about. I wonder whether we could actually use Nostr, because it's basically just JSON files, pure simple WebSockets with text as a way for the computers to communicate with each other over network without anything else, and they just build it upon that basis. Each and every new community, new protocol is facing some growing stages, and Nostr already has some human-based DDoS troll spam attacks early on, and Blue Sky is experiencing something at the moment. The difference obviously is that Blue Sky is one instance and not a protocol yet. Nostr is a protocol from the get-go, but here are some good ideas how to build the communities, how to build the moderation tools, and what it really requires to have a decentralized network going.
Adding my buddy who just joined Airchat. He's done a bunch of work in crypto, including at Library, at Strike, and most recently did some work on Nostr.
Apple decided to remove Damus, the leading iOS Nostr app, from the App Store because it allows tips. Because tips can be used for many things, even purchasing digital content, which the app doesn't provide. It's like a Twitter except that Twitter provides subscriptions directly. Nostr doesn't do no such thing. It doesn't host any content. It doesn't have any content. It's beyond its control with anything to do with content. So deplatformization it is.
It's odd. Apple will only allow zapping if it's on the profile page. Like, I can zap you if I go on your profile, but I can't zap your tweets and notes. To me, that just doesn't make any sense, because I can pay somebody to buy content from them, even by zapping their profile. I could just talk to them in the DMs and buy something. So it's just nonsensical reasoning used to disrupt and hinder this movement. Alas, I don't know what their issue with it is, but as long as it's not banned for speech, that's what I care about most. If that happens, then it really is war.
Twitter's tip function is the same. So in that sense, it is at least consistent.
This whole fiasco has made me realize that Apple is currently untenable. I mean, I doubt that they would even accept, some method to send 30% of every zap to them. I don't think that is even what they want. I'm not sure what they want. So to me, it seems like the best route forward right now is to focus on desktop and making this all work, like a decentralized web on desktop in any browser. And then after that, moving to building an Android browser, because Android already allows for custom browsers on the Play Store. So it would be pretty hard for them to ban a browser. It's always possible, but they might even run into legal trouble since they're already opened up. But don't take my word on that. That was just from a convo I had with somebody who worked at Microsoft and Mozilla and was kind of intimately involved in all the drama of the Android Play Store and the browser. So it seems like that's a better bet for now. And then later on, hopefully Apple will come along, especially if Apple realizes that they can run a node and make money. Essentially, the business that is GitHub and Twitter are currently monopolized by Microsoft and Elon Musk. So if Apple realizes that they can make money hosting tweets and hosting GitHub repos, then maybe they'll open up the decentralized web and allow for a browser, because then they can become competitors in these businesses that they're currently not allowed in, because we would have turned those businesses into protocols. By building browsers on mobile instead of individual apps, I think we gain a great advantage. So instead of building a Twitter and a GitHub and a Dropbox and whatever else, you just build this browser that can do all of those things. And now, if Android wants to declare war, they have to do it in one swoop. They have to ban everything. But if you create a bunch of individual apps instead of a browser, well, then they can just nip the apps in the bud that they don't like. They can just ban the apps they don't like. So I think a browser is a lot smarter, especially since it seems like Android's Play Store already has made a huge commitment to allowing for any types of browsers, potentially even a legal commitment. I'm not sure entirely on that, but that's what that one guy was making it sound like. So it sounds like a much better point of leverage, and it's not there for Apple yet. I think Apple, like I said, we're gonna have to woo them or build a new OS or just ditch them all together. So it's funny though, I have this inkling that the only way Apple is going to come along is if some new open source phone actually starts gaining traction and gets popular enough, or if they start losing tons of users to Android, then they will come along. And it's basically like, once we've guaranteed our freedoms enough, and once it gets big enough to where we don't need Apple anymore, that's when they finally will come along. And it's so frustrating because, that's That's what it's going to take. And it should be that way, because wooing Apple is pointless if they can just pull the rug underneath us at any time. Like, we really need to build a castle on a solid foundation, an open source OS on mobile devices that is like iOS, as clean as it, but, open source. That is the future. I mean, all of civilization relies on these phones. Like, how is there not a good open source OS out there? It blows me away. I mean, I know there's Graphene OS and all these Android mods, but they all are not that nice to me. I am addicted to the iOS gestures and all of that. So hopefully we will build that one day. It sounds like at the end of the laundry list, but it's certainly important. It's a foundation.
Yeah, I like that approach, sort of taking pro decentralization, because the hosting is so important. So if your iCloud would accept and allow and be a little bit customized for hosting your videos, hosting your rich content, hosting your tweets or whatever they call it in different platforms, that way I think you could own your own content as well, which is the preferred way, because now in Nostr and other places you squatting somebody else's servers, and you never know what's going to happen with your data. So it's natural in a way that one of these big ones would come to this space and do something hopefully positive in that sense. And I don't know who else could it be. Maybe Microsoft, but somehow Apple sounds a better candidate. But they are so late on things usually that it may take years, maybe 5 years before they realize that this is a big market enough. So in that sense, the discovery phase and the problems are already solved by some other means. On the other hand, Apple was introducing more options and features on PWAs, progressive web apps. So in that sense, the browser option of having your app as a, well, not in an app store, but still within looking like an app in your phone might be the way to go. And opening up of the app store anyways by legal pressure is the thing, but it's still taking the cut if you want to have it. So it's a halfway measure. So maybe the progressive web apps is the solution. Obviously, it doesn't help with the distribution and discovery for those apps, but it's better than nothing. Do you know how many Nostr clients there are? Well, this list, as of this JIT date, there's 28 row items, but I would say there's probably 15 active ones. It gives the features, it also lists them by the NIPs. Check it out if you're interested and haven't tested all of them. The OG iOS Nostr client Damus seems to be getting removal from the App Store pretty soon, because they've been trying to change the code and trying to be compliant with the Apple Store rules, guidelines, but it seems that if you just allow to have a tip option in the profile, even though they already removed that per tweets, it still is not good enough for Apple, because everything should go within the in-app route, which is obviously not the way to do it if you're doing it with Bitcoin. And is Apple even capable of accepting Bitcoin, and are they expecting to get 30% cut from all those things? So it doesn't really make any sense, because Twitter has the same option, and tipping somebody on their profile does not mean that it will unlock some content. There's no direct link between tipping and content. So it seems that Apple has a bad day, or there's just somebody who doesn't understand, or there's a bigger scene of things behind it, which is not revealed, because those guidelines can always be read in a way that it fits the ad hoc policy.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So the plan for the future is pretty much the same plan that we've had for the past 6 months with some minor improvements. The idea is that you can turn your Nostr profile with all your Nostr notes or your GitHub repos or your website into a Merkle tree, now a psionic Merkle tree, and you can store that on these Hornet relays. Then you put the Merkle root of the psionic Merkle tree on the Bitcoin blockchain. So now the Hornet relays know when there's an update to your Twitter profile or your GitHub repo and can start requesting missing leaves right when they see an update on the Bitcoin blockchain. So now that we have these new Merkle trees, it's just a much better system all around because the branches are so small for users and relays can sync missing leaves with small branches as well. So it really improves our end goal. We're just laying a very strong foundation to achieve that decentralized GitHub and synchronized Nostr.
This is pretty exciting. So when Threads becomes part of the Fediverse, you can also take the benefits of the rest of the Fediverse, so Mastodon instances and people there, but you don't need to be dependent on any single instance, which might be, well, overnight delete all your data. So this Ditto enables you to utilize the decentralized data servers in Nostr. So this way your data is not in any instance's hand, and all the benefits of Nostr are yours. So you can follow and like and engage with people across the threads and the rest of the Fediverse, and also obviously Nostr. So they got a funding for at least 1 year from the Jack Dorsey's donation. So there's a lot of good stuff happening at the moment. Here's the list of all the grant recipients who got it in the batch of July 2023. You can see the list of pretty much all the major clients and, well, the most significant development projects in the field. Obviously not an exhaustive list, but a good start.
Discord, Snapchat, Tinder, even Airchat could all be decentralized on Nostr, free of all of those annoying ads and just nonsense. I guess Airchat doesn't really have much of that, but I really feel like all of these could become Nostr apps, and feels like they need to be. Because it's funny, on Tinder and Snapchat, so many features are paid, but the features are just withheld. Like it would be totally possible to have those features open source for free, and then you could just spend the money on paying the nodes to do the job, instead of paying for these useless features that are bricked away by closed-sourced developers. Can't tell you how many times I've gone onto Snapchat and been sucked into the whole page full of nonsense. It's like thirst traps, and it's like the modern day tabloids. Like when you're at a grocery store and you see those magazines with all that bullshit on them. That's what they brought that to Snapchat. That's how the millennials deal with that now. It's like they're forcefully seen it whenever they want to talk to their friends on Snapchat. It's so annoying. And then Tinder not being encrypted, end-to-end encrypted. I mean, those are your most intimate conversations, are with a loved one, or with a potential loved one. That should be encrypted. And then Discord, it's like we have these giant group communities. We might as well have them be encrypted. And I think it's totally reasonable, especially all of the sensitive crypto projects using Discord. Just horrible security. So I think all of these apps deserve to be decentralized.
if you ever be using Kindle and you do highlights or you make some quotes from books or texts, this is what you see here. This is the level in Nostr nowadays already the clients are. This is just a regular note, quote from a book, and you can click the author and it goes to the profile page, and the text is obviously also copyable, and that's just the beauty of this thing. This is in the middle of your feed, so you can make book quotes. It's not just retweeting some text like what you can do in other regular social media. You can quote media and hey, is this the new peer-reviewed platform as well? So this is what happens when the innovation is free and everybody can contribute, and you can put your wildest dreams in reality, and people like them and they catch up. So this was done with the Nostr, one of the clients in the Apple ecosystem, so iOS, macOS, iPad OS, available already now. The Kiki wrote this in earlier this year, 4th of April, and he was exactly wondering how to make these composable highlights something useful and how that could happen. And you can read it in the article or even listen to that article by clicking on the top of the note. Well, it's a regular blog post, but here you see that you throw an idea and a few months later it has already happened. Nostr daily active user count has been pretty flat, between around 8,000 to some 10,000 users, with a few peaks going to 14,000, but pretty much between the 8 and 10,000 users, and it hasn't grown. Currently there are some 100,000 trusted users on Nostr based on the Nostr band definition, which is clearly behind Mastodon and even Blue Sky. The link gives some comparison to Blue Sky and some other alternative social media, how they've been faring this year. If you want to get a little bit wild and see what's happening in Nostr ecosystem, there's this new client called Nostr, and it has a lot of features in it. It may look a little bit more exotic, but it is really fast and there's a lot of things to discover. If you are in the Apple ecosystem, Nostr is my favorite client at the moment. It's packed with features. I would say it's on par with Twitter and probably going already over it in some sense. And it's really reliable, and it's my everyday client which I'm using on Apple ecosystem. I think they already now have a Mac app as well. To give idea of the speed in development, when you can just do what you wish, and you can also ask for things. I posted this a few days ago, and within the next 18 hours or so there was already a first version of it executed by the founder and creator of Nostr actually. Here is the WordPress plugin where you can host your own pictures on Nostr, so you don't need an external server or relay or anything to have your uploaded media files. You can control them yourself. Lens founder Stani, which is another blockchain-based alternative social media, has come to the conclusion that what Elon Musk is trying to do with you have to pay a little model to fight the spam and bots doesn't really work. You have to use something else. And Nostr clients some of them have been implementing Web of Trust, which is a really good way of blocking things you don't want to see. So basically how do you define is that you define the depth from the following, whom you're following and who they follow and all along that goes as many levels as you like, and the rest you don't see. So this way the regular spam people you don't follow who may not have any followers and it's just complete spam doesn't come to your feed, because it only shows the things you define it to see, and that's how do you control it by the following. Obviously if they are bad apples in your following, then spam creeps in, but nothing is perfect. If you want to develop something and you have some good ideas, till the end of this month, a few days left, you can apply for Nostr project funding from OpenSats, and this way maybe you can get your project up and running.
Nostr is the strong leader in two different ways. One, it is a much more interesting environment to build applications. Like, we can build much more interesting applications. It's like Blue Sky is super interesting, and some of its tech is better, but you can really only build a Twitter-like app on Blue Sky. And, Matrix, super interesting protocol. You can really only build like a direct messaging and group chat application on top of Matrix. And so Nostr lets us build many kinds of applications. And so, that's why I do stuff on Nostr and not ActivityPub in the Fediverse, because I don't get any leverage effect of it. I could build Nosocial on the Fediverse, but I don't, then someone couldn't build up on top of what I have. And that's the way open source works. The other way in which Nostr is different and powerful is that Nostr's use of connection to integration with Lightning means that easy, fast micropayments are possible, which means we have business models that aren't advertising or high-value subscription content. OnlyFans or Substack can do subscription content because you pay lots of dollars per month per thing. And so those are the two places that Nostr really succeeds. But we don't necessarily have more users. We aren't in as many communities. We don't necessarily have the UX is better. But we both can do more interesting applications. And, the financial model wasn't baked into Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and MySpace and all those others when they were starting. They didn't have any other model but advertising. And that is fundamentally different. And I don't see the Fediverse or Blue Sky or everyone else being willing to adopt Lightning payments or other equivalent micropayments. And so that's huge.
Hey, I've never used Nostr before, but I'm a big fan of Farcaster and the concept as a whole. Would love to hear some thoughts from people that have used both, why one might choose Nostr over Farcaster. I am definitely more on the Ethereum side than Bitcoin side, so maybe that has an impact as well.
Let's now talk about why Nostr is going to win. I think this way. Only a few months in, we already have a pretty rich ecosystem of apps that are being built on this open protocol. And every one of these projects is going to choose their own set of trade-offs. Nobody can stop them. Everything is allowed, so everything will be tried. And we get to see all of this play out in front of our eyes. So to application developers, I would say, don't be afraid to experiment with trade-offs. This is actually Nostr's superpower, the fact that this is all going to happen, whether we like it or not. And I think it will be glorious. Thank you.
The founding document in the GitHub, I can put it in the comment link, is a really good place to start, which gives a lot of reasons why Nostr is needed, and it's the latest development. But I'll give you a few reasons. First of all, because it doesn't have a blockchain. The second one, it is completely open protocol. And the third one, it is so simple. So it's easy to do whatever you please in there and innovate. And that means that nobody can stop you. And it's also free, which is the reason, going to the point number one, it doesn't have a blockchain.
Conference has been great so far. I got to know Marty really well. I met Jack, asked Snowden some questions, and it was actually cool. Snowden replied and said we needed file storage for media hosting on Relays. I didn't even ask him that question. I just said, what do you think Nostr needs? It was just lucky coincidence. So it's been really cool so far. But there are only a handful of talks that were really, really cool. But just the vibe of a small conference was refreshing. It's been a while.
I would argue that there was a center of gravity. People were saying that we were going to become China, or that China was going to become America, basically, that we were going to adopt the other models. And I actually think it's different. I think there's an authoritarian center of gravity that is pulling all manner of governments toward it, right? The Chinese government is very authoritarian, and many governments around the world are very authoritarian. But what's interesting is that we're seeing more liberal governments becoming more authoritarian. COVID was really a bright red warning flag that it doesn't take much. Sense of panic, sense of emergency. We're seeing the same thing with Israel and Hamas right now, where we go, but somebody's crossed the line. There's a 9/11 moment, and the old rules no longer apply. Classic rights will no longer be protected. The world has changed, so we as institutions will change. There's not time logistically for a vote. There's not time for a conversation. This is an emergency, don't you understand? And so we need to use the maximum extent of our capability, of our technology, to confront the threat. And step by step, bit by bit, what you see China and the United States becoming more like. You see Europe and China becoming more like. They still differ. There is distance between them, but the distance is narrowing. And that really is what should alarm us, particularly when you start looking at capability, when you look at surveillance, when you look at QR codes, when you look at control of money flows, when you look at control of communications, when you look at real name policies and identities, when you look at the fact that there's an everything app in China, like WeChat, that does payments, it does chat, it does identity, it does social media, it does travel, it does tickets. But the government in China requires you to go into an office and show ID in order to activate your account. And then you hear Elon Musk saying, "Oh, X is going to be an everything app." He's starting to pay people, but then you have to tie it to your identity in order to get paid. These are things that should really alarm us. And
I liked Rabel's presentation yesterday. It was really high quality, a lot of inspirational stuff in there. Then Primal one was good today. Then the Hapla founders presentation was also really nice. Those were at least some of them I recall now being of high quality. Obviously I saw some of yours, but it was only 480 resolution. I don't know why. So I was just waiting for a better one.
Number one single point of failure was myself, in that I was leading and making decisions around this for hundreds of millions of people and policy. The next was what you mentioned, incentives around revenue. Twitter was beautiful in the early days, and Rabel has talked about this, in that it was a pretty wide open API to the degree where we had so many developers on it experimenting, actually a lot of them in Japan. Japan was our biggest market because we had so many developers use the API to make things like Tamagotchis that you could feed and you could see pass away and live and smile. It was amazing. But it actually brought the site down all the time. And we got this fail whale, but that's when it most felt like a protocol, and that's when it felt the most special. As soon as we grew, we started with that feeling, but then we took money from VCs, and we made people that we employed a promise that these shares that we would give them would be worth some meaningful amount more than they were today. And that just set up a whole series of events that took us public, and before that created a business model such as advertising, which became another single point of failure, is the advertising pressure and the revenue model. I've said in the past that, like, if Bitcoin existed before Twitter started, we would have had a much better option and a much better path and removed at least one of the single points of failure. And that's what makes me so excited about Nostr, is it does have micropayments. Like, it's real. It's a scaled experiment that we can actually learn from. And that, to me, is so rare and so amazing that it actually exists right now, and people can play with it, and most importantly, feel it. And then the last single point of failure that was meaningful was what you mentioned in terms of the government, in terms of regulators. Obviously, a lot of this was exposed in the Twitter files, and it's very challenging as an individual or anyone in the company when the government or any government comes knocking at your door. It's very hard to take the stand that you took, especially as you have concerns about revenue and the company just going away because we're the smallest of the giants against Facebook and Google and everything else. And all that to say, what I think is changing, and these are all pendulum swings, and I think the pendulum is swinging back to a world where we can actually persist more open protocols because we have things like Bitcoin where everyone who contributes to Bitcoin from a development perspective or from a marketing perspective or a policy perspective makes it better for everyone else who does the same thing. And you have this very interesting virtuous loop. And I think the same is true for Nostr, in that, to me, the most powerful idea is not that it's recreating Twitter-like things or handling the social media use case, but it's this open, permissionless ecosystem of apps that anyone who creates one of those, and it's great, actually benefits the entire ecosystem. So it's this like cooperation that continues to build upon itself in a very unique way. And I don't know if we've had the tools to do that before, but maybe we did on the internet, and you know, the downfall was the centralization of the discovery mechanism. That's where Google came in, that's where Facebook came in, that's where Twitter came in.
Yeah.
Away from the Usenets, away from the IRCs, away from Gopher and all these technologies that were truly decentralized, but really hard to find something. And then the last single point of failure that was meaningful was what you mentioned in terms of the government, in terms of regulators. Obviously, a lot of this was exposed in the Twitter files, and it's very challenging as an individual or anyone in the company when the government or any government comes knocking at your door. It's very hard to take the stand that you took, especially as you have concerns about revenue and the company just going away because we're the smallest of the giants against Facebook and Google and everything else. And all that to say, what I think is changing, and these are all pendulum swings, and I think the pendulum is swinging back to a world where we can actually persist more open protocols because we have things like Bitcoin where everyone who contributes to Bitcoin from a development perspective or from a marketing perspective or a policy perspective makes it better for everyone else who does the same thing. And you have this very interesting virtuous loop. And I think the same is true for Nostr, in that, to me, the most powerful idea is not that it's recreating Twitter-like things or handling the social media use case, but it's this open, permissionless ecosystem of apps that anyone who creates one of those, and it's great, actually benefits the entire ecosystem. So it's this like cooperation that continues to build upon itself in a very unique way. And I don't know if we've had the tools to do that before, but maybe we did on the internet, and you know, the downfall was the centralization of the discovery mechanism. That's where Google came in, that's where Facebook came in, that's where Twitter came in.
Yeah.
Away from the Usenets, away from the IRCs, away from Gopher and all these technologies that were truly decentralized, but really hard to find something. The direction is going to capture all of us. So we have an option, and it's in this room, fortunately. And I want to thank you all for helping to build it. So we'll take another question.
Hi. I was wondering, besides the inaccessibility through Tor, are there any other scaling problems that you've encountered while using Nostr, or are there any other things you'd like to see Nostr enable?
I think that one's for you, Edward, if you're still there.
Yeah, sorry guys. We're keeping it weird, right? Yeah, I mean, I actually think Nostr is really capable right now. The main thing is to get people using it. I've seen some criticism of the Lightning Network integration with it, because people have criticism of Lightning. Lightning has worked pretty well for me. I mean, I've been excited. I see the Zapathons and everything like that. And what I like about it is that it's accessible for normal people. The thing that I don't like about it is that you are replacing one set of centralized gateways with another, in that nobody's running their own sort of Lightning node. Everybody is using an Alby or some other centralized provider, because they don't have their node running. And when they're offline, like Lightning doesn't work. These problems I don't know how to fix, but the core thing is, when we talk about things like video publishing, which is really, really popular for a lot of people's use cases, how are we going to host that? Image hosting is expensive. Video hosting and serving is way more expensive. And the reason so much of the internet has worked in the way that we grew to understand it was because, like Jack said, there was VC money that was quietly burning in warehouse in the background. What Google is doing right now with YouTube is the best example of that, and kind of what makes me worry for the plausibility of competing with them on that, is you look and they are trying to monetize every last inch of it all at the same time. Like, they've become very aggressive with ad blocking. They're running more ads. If you don't run an ad blocker, they'll run more and more and more and more and more ads until you subscribe to their service. And it's all happening at the same time. Whereas for the longest time, YouTube was something that was free, and most of the content that's on YouTube is not the kind of thing that you would pay for. And now suddenly they've changed the game, and YouTube has every video on the internet on it, even ones that don't belong to them were just ripped and re-uploaded from somewhere else. But if you're talking something like Nostr, like, how do we get videos up? How do we host them, like, en masse? I know people can embed things that they're doing now, and it's actually beautiful. It works wonderfully. I've had a good experience again when I can connect. But if you think about, like, a lot of people joining, like the Nostr version of the Fail Whale, we've got all these relays, and all of these relays have notes that are being written to them that are basically links to these other sites. How are we going to deal with bit rot, right? When we've got one repository like that, and the repository goes down, or like the first mover becomes, the sacred cow that we can't get rid of, because if they drop, we are losing a central part of the network, and we're losing the history that comes with it. These are tough questions.
Mozilla as a NGO foundation, yet talking almost in a corporate language, how they gonna enter the competition and capture some audiences and eyeballs from the current large players, because there's an opening in the market. Maybe that's the author's interpretation in the article, but anyways, what they're doing, they're setting up their own instance, and that's in ActivityPub. But it's the best thing you can do to have your little isolated island. And if you truly for the open environment and freedom and open communication, you probably would have picked up something else, a Nostr or maybe Blue Sky. But in ActivityPub, it's so convenient. You can have your own server and you can do your moderation and you can block the world if you like, and you can kick out people. So that's the best alternative if you don't want to spin up your own Twitter type of complete system. Contrast that to this presentation. This is in the timestamp 2 hours, 22 minutes and 50 seconds. And while I was listening to this one, I was just thinking this could have been Elon Musk talking about freedom of speech and really liberating the platform for public domain and for the purposes where it can do a huge impact and has already been doing the huge impact for the last 10 years in news and being the open discussion forum for the whole world with the open APIs and everything in the golden days of Twitter, as Jack Dorsey was mentioning in a few chits back.
Was honored to be mentioned in Marty's talk here right at the end about the future of Nostr and possibilities with peer-to-peer. But beyond that, this story was really cool to see. And, you know, I knew Marty was involved in the early days, but this really clarifies all of the little things. And like, for example, the first thing ever sold for Bitcoin and where dollars were actually exchanged was SpongeBob stickers. Laszlo's Pizza was the first, but that didn't involve, a dollar exchange rate. So who would have thought, SpongeBob stickers. Definitely worth a check if you guys are curious about the evolution of Bitcoin and how it's all led here to Nostr.
That's a really interesting thread. I have to agree. I've worked on developing stuff on Ethereum. I found it, quite slow, difficult, complicated. My mind was blown once I discovered Nostr, its simplicity, and basically, the experience of a Zap, which would have took a lot of clicks on MetaMask somewhere else, was particularly mind-blowing. I like the description of the slow bottom-up emergence of Nostr. Right now it's a lot smaller than Farcaster, but I can certainly see how it grows and wins.
One thing that's on the Bitstream paper that no one is talking about yet is that it actually provides a way to discover new servers. On Nostr right now, the only way you find new relays is by going to your friends' profiles and seeing what relays they're connected to. But with Bitstream, the relays freeze coins on-chain, as I described before. And when they freeze coins on-chain, that means you can go on-chain and find all of the relays. You can get a list of every relay that exists that's using Bitstream. So this is like a truly decentralized way of discovering new relays without just relying on your friends. And it also goes back to what we talked about with Naval at the beginning of the year, which is that you use the blockchain for a small amount of metadata. You don't put everything on it. You don't put all the tweets on it. You just have the list of relays on there. And I'm working on an idea to actually extend that to where you can actually use that list of relays and see which one of them is storing data for a given public key or a given person. That will be a whole nother paper, but I'm still working on it. But either way, at least with Bitstream, we're going to have that index of relays on chain and move us in that direction, in the right step forward.
that's a new feature on Iris2 and Snort social Nostr browsers, where you can check how does your social graph look like.
I'd like to talk about the state of Nostr in 2024. It's been a year since this decentralized protocol gained much attention and got a lot of people working on it. So it would be nice to have a recap of what was achieved and where we are now.